Hello, and welcome back to another match within the Real Beat Star Tournament. Finally going into your next match, and we'll be starting to see a lot more matches, especially as we are pretty much into the weekend now. But we are into this losers bracket, which is going to be fewesf9 and ElSweetSlime. Very interesting match coming. I mean, ElSweetSlime kind of showing a lot of dominance in the SV department, so it's definitely going to be interesting to see. But with that, we can move on into our rolls now. Fewes with a 57 roll, ElSweetSlime with a 44. Pretty close rolls in general, but we'll have to kind of see how these players do act upon their kind of protects and bans. And I mean, kind of seeing things. I mean, SV is a map that can't be banned, so ElSweetSlime definitely does have that safety net for if our SV pick, if the other opponent isn't really too confident in a map like that. I mean, especially kind of judging their scores within the tournament and just stats in general. It is kind of a map that ElSweetSlime probably has a little bit of an edge on if he was choosing to protect first, so they will be able to protect first. And then ElSweetSlime will be getting the second ban. It is going to be really interesting to see what these two decide to kind of go for, but he was going for a protect on Hybrid 3, a very interesting protect, especially just for the sheer kind of techie nature of it, but it is a map that I do think can be very favorable for different players. I mean, especially as we do kind of climb into more scattered pools, more physical pools. I mean, all of these maps are going to have different effects for different players. It's not really going to be like the early rounds, round of 64 or round 32, where the maps are fairly easy. There isn't really much categorization, albeit still categorization, and you don't really see the effect of certain maps being a lot easier in that sense, but when you start to kind of get into these more later pools, I mean, there are maps which people will definitely have an easier time and harder time on. I mean, especially with the introduction of Jax and a tech hybrid. But I mean, alongside that though, I mean, you do have these other maps which also start to kind of diverse in difficulty. I mean, you have Angel Echo being technically the easiest Ellen in terms of star rating, but it is really tricky to kind of coordinate and get really good accuracy on. And then you have Love and Summer, which is very dense, and it goes a lot faster compared to these other maps. And you do have Ellen 3, which is basically a timing count. But we are going to see ElSweetSlime going for a ban on Rice 1, which, I mean, as we kind of progress through the tournament, I do expect Rice 1 to kind of be banned a little bit more and more. And then we see an LN3 ban coming in, which does make sense, a little bit of a trickier map. But it is now time for Fewes to pick. And I mean, as we do get on, I mean, speed picks definitely do get a lot faster. And they are their kind of own category, basically, compared to all these other Rice maps. Because, I mean, speed isn't really the biggest kind of skill set, at least within a tournament, I would say. It definitely does bring a little diversity into Rice pools in general, but we'll have to see what is chosen. And looks like we're going into SV1 very early on.
Every day I know that I miss you. Every hour, every minute that I breathe.
But here we go, we are getting into this now. I mean, it's going to be really interesting to kind of see how this turns out. I mean, it technically is possible for it to kind of go to either player, but we do kind of have to wait and see. But here we go, we are going into this first map. We'll have to kind of wait and see. I mean, the map's almost starting, so there isn't really too much to really state off. But here we go, getting into this. Both players having very similar accuracies. We do see, it looks like a great though, coming from ElSweetSlime very early on. which is kind of expected, at least in terms of players generally playing this map. Beginning being a little bit tricky to kind of get good judgments on, but we'll see how the rest of this goes. But as we do continue on, I mean, it looks like ElSweetSlime was a little bit of a lead so far. It is only starting to grow, especially as we do kind of reach into that later combo. And Few is still holding very good accuracy with a pretty decent 99, a little bit on the lower side, but I mean, on an SV map, you do expect the 99s to be on the lower side as well, especially for just the sheer trickiness of these maps. I mean, both these players are very close in terms of accuracy, both dropping below that 99, and especially as we do get to this part, I mean, fewesf starts to kind of catch a little bit of a lead. We'll kind of have to wait and see how this does treat ElSweetSlime. I mean, especially with this kind of map where it isn't really the most simple map in terms of kind of raw patterning. It does have quite a few tricky patterns, which could add a little bit to the difficulty within this map. You also have these kind of strange kind of stutters, and at times even unnormalized SVs. But if we do get through this part, I mean, it looks like fewesf might be able to take this one, as long as they don't mess up at this very ending. And fewesf will be taking the point. A pretty good lead, I mean, around 8,000. Fairly far, but it does kind of grab a little scaredness. I mean, a pick like this getting taken from fewesf is kind of interesting to see. I mean, it definitely does kind of bring that safety net that ElSweetSlime might have had into kind of a little bit of danger. Because, I mean, they have been showing a lot of prominence in the SV department, and kind of seeing them lose this point could spell out some danger for them at least. But they are going for LN1, a bit of a more trickier LN, but it could work out in their favor. It isn't really as physical as some of these other maps maybe, but it definitely does kind of have a lot of its components that do make it really difficult. Especially just for its kind of lower SR. I mean, 4-star, when we're kind of getting into a pool where we start to kind of see a lot of higher 4-stars and some 5-stars as well. I mean, you see this map and you see OD7. I mean, on an LN map, you have to expect some very scary patterns. But here we go. We are moving on to this next pick, LN1, our coordination pick. A very tricky LN map, but it definitely does have kind of simple snappings. But as we do get through this map, I mean, you start very simple, but as we do get into more intense parts, we will start to see a lot more trickier patterns, very kind of tight releases as well. I mean, there's always the factor of having to hold and switch between a lot of these different LNs. Definitely does add a lot of difficulty into it. But I mean, as we are getting through this, fewesf is still holding a pretty decent lead. Near 99.7, I mean, it's kind of flickering a little below that, but still very good, especially on a map like this. Kind of a ban bait to a degree, especially just because it's really raw trickiness. I mean, ElSweetSlime not doing too bad either, holding a pretty decent 99, but not going to be able to keep up with fewesf, who's holding a 99.7. I mean, on a map like this, that is really impressive. I mean, that is in the 990s range, a little above it as well. So we're going to have to kind of wait and see how both these players do. I mean, a map like this could be very easy to mess up on. I mean, it's very easy to grab a few grades here and there, potentially a miss if you aren't careful enough. But as we do get into a little bit more intense part, you start to see a little bit more kind of normalization within the LNs. But it's still going to have that intensity, still going to have that difficulty, it's going to have all the tricky coordination aspects that a regular LN pick does have. And as we are kind of getting through this, I mean, ElSweetSlime dropping a little bit below that 99 range, just struggling to keep up there. Few was holding a 99.68, a very high 99.6. And dropping a little bit of accuracy though compared to earlier, but still a really good score regardless. I mean, they are starting to drop a little bit of accuracy as well. I mean, both players dropping a lot of accuracy, especially with the intensity of this map. I mean, Fewes will taking that point though. 984, pretty decent, especially on a map like this. I mean, ElSweetSlime holding that FC, but you could definitely tell that on a map like this, it might be a bit easy to kind of hold that FC, but to kind of maintain that accuracy is a completely different story as well. But I mean, it is Fewes' pick, so we'll have to kind of see what they choose. But I mean, seeing how things went, we might see a hybrid, or maybe even Ellen too. But going into this protect, I mean, it does make sense, especially for the stage we're in. I mean, halfway into winning the match, at least on the side of Fewes, I mean, a protect isn't too bad of a pick here, especially kind of seeing what there is. I mean, I do kind of see the reason behind it. I mean, gets you to that halfway mark, and especially with this kind of lead that Fewes does have, I mean, it does give them a little bit of a safety net in case they do lose a point along the way. But here we go, if we do get into this pick, a little bit of a more kind of physical one as well. I mean, this map does require a lot of kind of mini jack control, transition skills. This map is very techy. I mean, there's a reason it is labeled as the tech hybrid, so we'll have to kind of see if both these players can really keep up with that. I mean, especially with this map, it's really easy to just kind of get a miss on. But here we go, starting off somewhat simple. Still a lot of tricky components to it. And ElSweetSlime getting the first miss within the match. Definitely going to shift that lead all the way over towards Fewes, especially with that accuracy lead. It's just going to put them into a lot more of a kind of safety area, almost dropping a whole percent. I mean, Fewes also getting a miss there. I mean, you can definitely see that the kind of trickiness and physicality of this is definitely kind of kicking in for these players. At least a little bit. I mean, especially as we kind of move on through these rounds, I mean, you're going to start to see maps really start to make players struggle just because of how tricky they are, or just because of the physicality that they require. I mean, ElSweetSlime dropping below that 98 range, trying to climb back up and getting there, but we'll have to see if they can kind of keep up with that. I mean, as we do get into this break, I mean, Fewes building up that accuracy again. Not all the way up, but I mean, it still is relatively good, especially with that one miss that they did get. But as we did get into this later half, I mean, both players definitely being on opposite sides of the spectrum. Fewes holding such a high lead. I mean, you're gonna have to hope that Fewes gets a massive break for ElSweetSlime to get that point. I mean, ElSweetSlime's really kind of struggling to kind of keep up as well. I mean, a 1% difference, it definitely does kind of tell you the story with this match. I mean, there isn't really much that ElSweetSlime can really do unless we start to see Fewes drop a lot more, like we see right here. I mean, especially with these mini jacks right here, they can be really tricky to hit. But Fewes will be taking that point with a 974. I mean, a pretty good score, and a good one from ElSweetSlime too. I mean, a 927, 98, it's still a really good score just in general. I mean, this map is very tricky in nature, and it's so easy just to get misses on this back and forth. I mean, this ElSweetSlime's pick. We'll have to kind of see what they choose. But going for Rice 6, a bit of a surprising one. I mean, we haven't seen any of the Rice maps chosen, and I mean, seeing from their ban, I mean, speed is definitely not their kind of preference when it does come to these speed maps, so seeing Jack makes a little bit of sense, I would say. But here we go, going into the Jack pick. I mean, we'll have to see how this does treat the players. I mean, a map like this is a lot more simpler. Might be a little bit of a challenge in terms of physicality, but in terms of patterning, this is a really, really simple map. I mean, it's just Jacks. But here we go, going into the Jack map. I mean, so far, Few is holding a 100%. ElSweetSlime, not doing too bad either, but definitely a little bit lower on the ratio side. And as we continue, Few is still holding a very good ratio. ElSweetSlime's trying to falling a little bit behind, but still doing relatively good. I mean, this map is also going to get a little bit harder as we do kind of progress, so it is a little bit difficult to kind of judge how both these players will do. I mean, Few is still holding a really high accuracy. It does kind of show that even if once this map does get a little bit more intense, I mean, they'll still have a little bit of comfortability, even if it is just ever so slightly less. ElSweetSlime not holding a bad score, but I mean, at that ag range, especially on a Jack map, they could get a little bit tricky as we get into a little bit of a harder part, like right here where you start to see a little bit kind of more speed Jack burst, and you start to see this section which is really continuous, and you start to see them struggle just ever so slightly, and dropping down below that 99, still holding an FC though, surprisingly enough. I mean, it really does kind of go to show the difficulty that this map really does bring, and finally getting a miss just right there, but there's still one section left after this one. I mean, at this range, I mean, it's really hard to kind of expect viewers to really miss, unless we kind of see something really catastrophic happen, although that's really unlikely, especially with this map. I mean, there isn't really too much to happen. The miss coming from Few is really surprising though, but I mean, it's not going to be enough, especially with ElSweetSlime getting a lot more misses at the very beginning. Few is just going to take this comfortably by a long shot. I mean, that physicality really starting to kind of be a little bit of a factor, at least for Few. I mean, even if that accuracy is still in favor of them, I mean, the raw physicality that Few does have compared to ElSweetSlime definitely does give them a little bit of a lead at least. Good scores from both players. I mean, you definitely do see a huge difference though. But we'll have to see. I mean, it is Few's pick. I mean, really hard to kind of see it going at least in favor of ElSweetSlime, just because, I mean, it's their pick. I mean, it's their pick. They really are able to control what happens. But it is possible. I mean, especially in the sense of this tournament. But we're seeing Rice3, our tech pick, a very interesting pick, but I do think this pick could work a lot in favor of fewesf. But here we go, going into our tech pick. A very interesting pick, but we'll kind of see how this does go. I mean, a little bit on the lower side of SR, but still a very tricky map. And it does require a lot of kind of control, kind of stop and go. So we'll have to see if maybe a map like this could potentially favor ElSweetSlime. Here we go. I mean, he was holding a really strong accuracy lead already. I mean, a 99.9, especially on a map like this where things are already very tricky enough. I mean, that is still a really impressive score. I mean, ElSweetSlime also holding good accuracy though. I mean, 99.5 isn't too bad either. Dropping a little bit down, but still a very good score. But we'll have to kind of see, especially with this part right here, where I would say it's really easy to kind of just drop rates just because of the kind of surprise factor of these mini jacks. I mean, it definitely does kind of come as a little bit of a surprise, as we do see ElSweetSlime getting a miss right here. But we'll have to see if maybe one of these parts starts to catch fewesf off guard and potentially give that lead towards ElSweetSlime. But we do kind of have to wait and see, especially as we do get into this break part right here. But here you go, we are going to kind of jump back into the intensity. I mean, ElSweetSlime holding a little bit better accuracy, especially compared to some of these kind of earlier maps. Still holding a pretty decent 99, we'll have to see if maybe fewesf drops. I mean, as we do continue, I mean, fewesf showing no signs of stopping, holding a very strong 99.8, especially on a map like this is really impressive. I mean, not to discredit ElSweetSlime, I mean, they're still putting it their all, still putting a decent accuracy. I mean, doing a lot better compared to some of these other maps, and that's definitely something to kind of put up in there. But with the kind of raw trickiness of this map, I mean, there isn't really much to do. I mean, fewesf getting a miss, but still, that accuracy lead and that combo lead that they had, it's definitely going to kind of help them just a little bit more. Especially with this map ending. I mean, that miss at the very end might not be as damaging as maybe kind of a miss in the middle, but it is going to go towards fewesf with 987, and that will conclude the match with fewesf getting that win. But that does unfortunately mean that ElSweetSlime will be knocked out of the tournament. fewesf moving on into their second match, into their conditionals. So GG will play to both players, but unfortunately ElSweetSlime is going to be knocked out, and fewesf will be advancing to the next match within round of 16. But with that, I'm your commentator Znow, and I'll be seeing you soon.